Shalom, everyone. I am Richard Rolfing. I'm your instructor for this semester and beyond. A note on a few things in the syllabus. I'm pretty sure you've all seen the syllabus by now because you filled out the questionnaire. In the first week here, which is of course next week, I realize that we started this week, but in this first week, I say that you should practice some of these exercises of the Aleph Bet beforehand. And if you are able to get to the syllabus, go ahead and click here if you haven't done already, and you'll see some of the first workbook sheets that have been provided through Lexham's website. Okay, so I just want to briefly walk through a few things from the textbook, and then make sure that you guys have a basic orientation to pronunciation. What I've got here on the screen is going to be a little bit different than what's in our textbooks, so just note that, although most of it's going to be the same. What I have is a digital copy from Carl Kutz and Rebecca Josberger. So this will be the first page where you've got the Paleo Hebrew underneath the square script, as it's called. But to learn the letter names and their pronunciation, we'll start here. This is again a little bit different than what you have in front of your eyes, but it'll do. It's nice and big. So the first letter is Aleph, and although that sounds like our vowel A, as you may know, Hebrew doesn't have vowels, technically speaking. The vowel points are added in later, and we'll talk about that in our first class. But this is Aleph. It's essentially a glottal stop, so something like the T's in a Cockney English, ball. But you're not really going to pronounce this letter. So that's the first letter, Aleph, and then the second letter is Bet or Vet. And again, in your textbooks, Carl and Rebecca have both the Bet and the Vet. I realize this is a little bit small, but you can see the Bet has the Dagesh in it, which is that little eyeball peeking out at you, or that belly button, if you can remember that, for the Bet. And then without that, it's Vet. Okay, so Aleph, Bet, Vet, and then we have Gimmel. All right, Gimmel is the third letter, and this comes from all of the Hebrew letters. If we were to go back to the Paleo Hebrew, and we'll talk about this a bit more, all of these are initially pictograms. So Gimel comes from Gamal, which is a camel. Bet comes from Bait, which is a house, and Aleph comes from Elef or Aleph, which has to do with cattle. So I'm not going to reference all of the connections to those pictograms in Paleo Hebrew, but just so you know that each of these essentially is the name of some kind of noun. There's a kind of graphic or physical connection that these Paleo Hebrew pictograms are representing. All right, so we've got Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and then after Gimel we have Dalet. So Aleph Bet is a B or a V sound, depending upon whether it has the belly button or not. Gimel, and I'll explain how Gimel, although you'll see here that it has the belly button as well. There, I suppose we could call it something in its throat stuck there, or Dalet. Each of these has a Dagesh. They can take a Dagesh, and I'll explain what that means in class again. But for right now, I'll just note where pronunciation changes and where it doesn't. Okay, so Bet, Vet, you have the change there. Gimmel, you're not going to hear it. You would have historically, but for our purposes, we're going to be using the modern Israeli pronunciation, and you won't hear any difference between a Gimel with a Dagesh or one without. Okay, so Dalet is our, and again, you can see there's correspondence, of course, like A, B. There's no C, of course, but you've got a kind of G and D. It's not all in the same order, but it has some rough correspondence. Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet Hey. Okay, so that's like our H in many ways. Hey, and notice that Hey is open here. Okay, so there's going to be quite a lot of what we'll call look-alike letters. So Hey and Het down here, you can see, look almost exactly alike, but Hey is open. Okay, so when things are open towards the world, you say, "Hey, how you doing?" So Hey, and then Het is closed. All right, Het means sin in Hebrew, actually. So sin closes us off. And then we have Vav. Now, one of the reasons that I'm doing this early, I guess we could say, is I want you guys to know and learn the pronunciation that we're going to be using in our class, because there are various pronunciations out there, and not everyone uses the modern Israeli pronunciation. So you may have come from a course or a background, if you've had any Hebrew before, that uses a slightly different pronunciation, in which case you would have pronounced this letter Wav, possibly. That's fine. That is certainly one way to pronounce it. That's not how we're going to pronounce it in this class or context. Okay, so Vav. So we have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zain. All right, Zain here. And I am going to teach you a song, so you can hopefully more effectively remember the Aleph Bet. And after I go through all of these, we'll learn the song. Okay, so Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zain, and then we have Het, which remember I said is closed. You have Tet, Yod, Kaf. Now here you'll see we get to what's called the final forms. You have a Kaf and a final form Kaf, and it's like a little kickstand has been put down on the Kaf there. All right, we're going to have 5 final forms, and all of them will sort of kick down the kickstand, except for Mem. Mem is the only one that does not do that. So in the book, let me just grab that, because hopefully you've ordered the book. If you haven't, you should do so immediately. But you have something very similar in the kind of gray box here, and the line there is as if on, you know, the kind of grade school writing paper. What do they call that paper? Ruled paper. So this drops down as if we were to have an imaginary line, and I'll go through this in class on a kind of board situation. So Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zain. Then we have Het, which is, of course, a guttural, kind of pharyngeal, and you're gonna, if you can, you're gonna pronounce that in your throat, Het, or Het at the back of your throat, if you can't do it down in your throat. And we'll have lots of fun in these times of COVID, learning all these gutturals. Zain, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf, and then we have Lamed. And notice, Lamed is one of the only letters that is going to like stick up above the kind of the line. And the rabbis have lots of fun with their Lameds. They send them way up, kind of in the page, and make peacock feathers out of them and all kinds of things to beautify the script. Lamed Mem, okay, and Mem has a final form as well. So as far as correspondences to English letters, Bet is like a B, and Vet without the belly button is like a V. Gimmel is going to be like a G. Although not all of the G sounds, it will be like the G in the first G in garage. It will not be like the latter G, j, okay? Dalet is like a RD, so door, something like that. Hey, I said like our H. Vav is a little bit trickier, but for now, think of it as a V sound. Zain is like our Z. Het is like nothing we have, but you can think about it, I suppose, like the CH in Bach, right? Johann Sebastian Bach. Tet is like a hard T sound. Yod is like our Y, and then Kaf is something similar to our K sound, I suppose. These that have either gutturals or where you're going to have some kind of breathiness going on, they may not have a full correspondence. Lamed is like our L. Mem is like our M sound, okay? Mother, Lamed, learn you something. Nun here, this is the next letter, is like our N, all right? If it comes at the end of a word, it will be the kind of elongated form where it sort of kicks out its leg to stop things. So again, the final form, what final refers to is when it comes to the end of if it comes at the end of a word, then you're going to use this form of that letter, and we'll work on that. So nun samek, samek is like an S sound, like a sharp S. Ein, we don't have this consonant. Again, this is a guttural. There's several gutturals. There's 4 gutturals. So we have Aleph, that's one of our gutturals. Hey is a guttural. Het is a guttural. And Ein is a guttural. Can hear that kind of pharyngeal constriction again. Ein. You don't have to make that sound. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Not even all Hebrew-speaking Israelis, Jews from different parts of the world use that kind of deep or really guttural ein. So the last guttural is not a pure guttural. It's a kind of guttural-like sound, and that's the R sound, or the resh, which you would say towards the back of the throat. And sometimes I can make it sound more like an Israeli, and other times a whole lot less. And as it's late and my throat is rather dry, it's going to be a less moment, I can assure you. Okay, ein. Then we have pe or fe. Depending upon, again, whether or not it has the dot or the dagesh in it. And if it comes at the end of the word, it is a final form, pe or fe. Then we have tsadi, which is like a ts, like in cats. And then the final form, tsadi sofit, kicks out the kickstand. One more letter that drops down kind of below the imaginary line is kof, which is like a hard Q, like in queen, or a hard K, like kick. Okay, we already talked about resh a little bit, like a rolled R in the back of the throat. And then we have a letter which, for all intended purposes, looks very similar, sin and sheen. It is seen if it's on the left. It is sheen if it's on the right, because sin is never right. And then lastly, we have taf, which is another Begad Kefet letter.